When I was in library school, we built InfoGlobe, which was the first online full-text retrieval database. And then it went to the New York Times, and that software was used to build the New York Times online. And while we were doing it, as library schools, when are you going to do all the newspapers back to the New York Times? Of course, they told us it was impossible. Then when I moved to Micromedia and ProQuest, we were able to convert every single word that's ever appeared in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, LA Times, Christian Science Monitor, I forget what CT is, Washington Post, Boston Globe. And then we converted the entire Globe and Mail, Toronto Star, 400 other databases in Canada. And now they're all up on Google. You don't really want to search them on Google because it's a hard. But how do we sit there and decide as librarians to give access to our full history? And how does that change things? All of a sudden, it's not about the full text that's in a newspaper. It's about genealogy and finding things back into genealogy. How does that affect medicine? You go into medicine and say, gee, I can do my genealogy, which is what old parts do for hobbies nowadays. And it's a huge public library niche. But if you want to know when everybody in a family died for a research project, decide if a certain disease is genetic or not, that's a big chunk of the genealogical research they do there. And there's the research piece, there's the medical piece, and then there's the hobby piece. But if you want to sit there and search women's history, do you want to go through rolls of microfilm to look at how bras were advertised for the last 200 years? No. But you go into here and you can find every women's undergarment ad back to the beginning of time, which actually talks about the changes that have happened and how women's products can be talked about. And there's several dissertations happening now that wouldn't have happened because no one's going to choose a dissertation topic that requires looking at 200 years of microfilm. I spent some time with doing massive post-millennial research, and a lot of my speeches are on the millennials. I don't know why this is doing that. It will stop. I got through the ethics review board at Kent State University, and we MRI'd 1,000 kids' heads. You probably know that the millennials have been totally rewired. Their brains are very different. You know that their IQs are 20 points higher than the boomers on average. They've had to change the IQ tests radically since 1960, every 18 months, because the average IQ has to be 100. That's the way it has to work. And so they have to keep making the test harder to accommodate the increase in intelligence of the millennials. Their brains are wired differently. They have more sulci, more gyride, they've edited out fewer ganglia, and their brains work faster. There's several reasons for this. The main reason being, when open abortions came in, wanted children have higher IQs. If you've read Freakonomics, there's several chapters on that. But also we told women, don't drink when you're pregnant, don't smoke when you're pregnant, that's another influence. And then we did a bunch of stuff on taking the lead out of paint. So apparently it affects your IQ to chew on your bed. So there's no lead paint. We took the lead out of the kettles and stuff like that. But they're a very, very, very smart generation. And they have almost no fact-based knowledge because we changed the education system to be process-based. They all did group work. They all did articulation. They'd stand up and talk in class almost every single minute. And in my generation, we had a 1-minute speech in grade 6 and a 5-minute speech in grade 9, and we all got diarrhea, and it was a horror. We never wanted to speak in public again. And most of us, I had to spend most of my 20s overcoming my fear of public speaking, which I've been reasonably successful at. But when you've got a very bright generation who don't have any fact-based knowledge, which is a good thing, because I was taught that water boils at 212 degrees. They said, oops, no, it's 100 degrees Celsius. But since it doesn't, and it really doesn't, why did they install that fact in my head when it's wrong, right? So why on earth would I sit there and say, gee, how often am I going to be at sea level with perfectly still, perfectly clear water that boils at 100 degrees? When water boils at 213 in Montreal, 214 in Toronto, 215 in Denver. So we need to know the context of all these facts. We also know the half-life of a fact is about 8 years before it goes bad. So we have all this information, I had to memorize the periodic table. Well, gee, there's 20 new elements since I went there, so what good was me memorizing that? Why wouldn't I just look it up online? Who, what, where, when? Google's got all that crap. Can I process the information, work with others, talk about it, interpret it, make decisions, handle it? That's what Canada's one of the leaders in moving our education to that level. My wife spent most of the 90s rewriting the textbooks for campus, 40 best-selling books on how to deal with this stuff. So the project I was involved in was, can we change education? So I hired and led a team of 250 librarians who wrote a website of every single lesson, for every single day, for every single subject, for every single grade, for every single learning style. We had 3 video games every single day. The homework was on science, was to go use the Hubble telescope, was to go drive the Mars landing rover, was to go work with a project to pull Gaia apart to show how continental drift works. You can pull it apart wrong, you can pull it apart right. Think kids learn better doing that? Yeah, we were doing it for Ohio, which is the smartest state in the US. All 10 Canadian provinces get better scores than Ohio. But, yes, even that province. Whichever one you're bidding it against. But when you go into Ohio, you got a very smart state, and how do we make a change? So we were able to put every single card catalog for every single library, every single database that they subscribe to, and every time a kid went in and put in a zip code and did a search, they automatically got what books met their criteria at the local library closest to them and at their school library. So we forced them to trip over good information. Anyway, it's an interesting project. We've launched it in 7 states. We did eye tracking software. You probably know that millennials' eyes work differently than boomer eyes. Boomer eyes started working in A-frame. We gradually learned to work in an F-frame as our eyes move on a piece. And now millennial eyes work as a circle and a hole. And that's how and I published all this on the schoolrooms.net website, all of our eye tracking pieces. If you followed eye tracking, Google, I blogged this last week, Google does a bunch of stuff around what are they reading, what are they scanning, what aren't they reading, what do they look at most, and this is the F frame, I probably didn't put up. And then where do their brains work, how do we engage their brains, what causes learning to lock down. If we can pick all 4 places in the brain, when they're looking, listening, generating verbs versus speaking, come from different parts of the brain as we do it. And so following this brain-based research tells us how to design an engaging Web 2.0 kind of thing. Why? Part of the reason why their intelligence is up is because of video games, right? It's a lot of them designed in this city here, brought by CAE. CAE's been very successful. My cousin was president of Sony Interactive. And so he built things like EverQuest. My one cousin built EverQuest, my other cousin's the president who managed them. And EverQuest is the second most addictive game on the internet after World of Warcraft. But he also built some of the early Super Mario stuff. Super Mario is based on learning scaffolding theory. How do people adapt stuff? When you learn to read, you learned A first, then you practiced it. Big A, small A, that sort of stuff. When you learned, the next letter you learned was T. And you did capital T, small t, you practiced it. Then you put A and T together. Ah, it's a word, great. Then you read The Cat in the Hat, because Dr. Zeiss wrote a book called The Cat in the Hat to teach people how to do it. And so then you get the learning cascade, cat, mat, rat, sat, hat. And that's how by the end of 26 letters, you've got the ability to assemble them, or most people do, and they have to, the few who don't in grade 4, we go and teach them a different way. Because if you don't learn how to read by the end of grade 4, you're materially damaging your reading speed for life. However, we do the same thing with video games. So here, the Americans build all the video game levels, even those shoot-'em-up games are based on countries they think they have to attack. So the first country is America or Canada, and the bathrooms and the doors are everywhere where we'd expect them. But other parts of it are house styles from Afghanistan, Iraq, Arabia, Korea, where the bathrooms, front doors, in your courtyards are in different places. So you can build an entire generation who can make a village safe or clear a village because they know in the back of their head.